They left me dying on the cold office floor while raising a glass to their freedom under the park sun. My husband and my closest friend believed the sudden stroke had rendered me a hollow corpse, a mere shortcut to the wealth I had spent 15 years building. However, they committed one fatal error. They assumed I was deaf to their schemes, unaware that I regained consciousness exactly as they signed the death warrant for their own future. My name is Elena Vance. At 34 years old, I sat in the corner office of Stratus Architecture in Seattle, staring at the blueprints for the Skyline project. This was a contract worth $10 million, the kind of career-defining work that demanded blood, sweat, and evidently, my sanity. I rubbed my left temple, trying to massage away the throbbing headache that had been my constant companion for the last 3 weeks. My arm felt heavy, a dull numbness creeping from my fingertips up to my elbow, but I ignored it. I always ignored it. I had to. I was the only thing standing between my family and financial ruin. My husband, Mark, had been unemployed for 2 years, claiming he was waiting for the perfect management role while he spent his days on the couch. My daughter, Bella, was only 5 years old, innocent and demanding, needing a future I was killing myself to secure. Then there was Sienna, my best friend of 15 years. She was the one who texted me good morning every day, the one who brought me kale smoothies and listened to me vent about Mark. Yet, lately, I had caught a glint in her eyes when she looked at my corner office or my designer handbags. It was a look that soured the milk of human kindness, a fleeting shadow of raw envy that I pushed to the back of my mind. My phone buzzed against the glass desk. It was Mark. I picked up, hoping for a shred of encouragement before my big presentation. "I need $600 transferred to the joint account right now," Mark said, his voice devoid of warmth. "Mark, I'm about to go into the boardroom," I whispered, fighting the sudden wave of nausea that rolled over me. "Can't this wait? I don't feel well." "It's for the car repairs." "Elena," he snapped, "do you want me to be stranded? Just do it. I have a busy day." He hung up before I could tell him that my vision was blurring at the edges. I transferred the money with trembling fingers. Prioritizing him was a reflex, a muscle memory I could not shake. I stood up to head to the conference room, but the floor seemed to tilt violently to the left. I grabbed the doorframe, gasping for air. The numbness in my arm exploded into a paralyzing dead weight. I stumbled into the hallway where the junior architects were waiting. Their faces swam before me like a watercolor painting left out in the rain. "Mrs. Vance," one of them asked. I tried to speak, to say I needed a moment, but my tongue felt like a lead weight in my mouth. My knees buckled. I hit the carpet with a dull thud that vibrated through my skull. Screams erupted around me. "Call 911. She's not breathing right. Get the crash cart." "No! Don't move her." I was lying on my side, my cheek pressed against the rough fibers of the office carpet. My vision narrowed to a pinprick of light and then vanished completely, leaving me in a terrifying gray fog. Yet, the sounds were agonizingly sharp. I could hear the rip of Velcro as someone loosened my collar. I could hear the distant wail of a siren growing louder. I desperately wanted to call Mark. I needed him to know. I tried to command my hand to reach for the phone in my pocket, but my body had severed ties with my brain. I was a prisoner in my own skin. Then came the chaotic transition to the stretcher, the rush of cold air, and the sterile smell of the ambulance. A paramedic was shouting vitals. "We need to contact the next of kin," a rough voice said. I have her phone. Last call was to hubby. The phone rang. 1 ring, 2 rings. The paramedic put it on speaker so he could continue working on my IV line. "This is Mark." His voice filled the small, rattling cabin. "Mr. Vance, this is Seattle Emergency Services," the paramedic said urgently. "Your wife has suffered a massive stroke. We are transporting her to Mercy General. Her condition is critical. I strained every fiber of my consciousness to hear his reaction. I expected panic. I expected the sound of keys jingling as he ran to the car. Instead, there was a pause. A long, heavy silence. Then, Mark spoke, his tone irritated and dismissive. "Look, I'm busy with something important right now. Just take her to the hospital first. I'll get there when I can." The line went dead. The paramedic cursed under his breath. Did he just hang up? A coldness deeper than the paralysis seized my heart. He was busy. My husband, the man I worked 18 hours a day to support, was too busy to care that I was dying. The betrayal stung worse than the hemorrhage spreading in my brain. As the siren wailed on, dragging me toward the hospital, I felt the last tether of my conscious mind snap. I drifted into the dark water of the coma, carrying only one thing with me: the sound of his indifference. The darkness was absolute. It was not the restful black of sleep, but a heavy, suffocating void that pressed against my consciousness. I tried to open my eyes, but the lids felt like they were welded shut with steel. I commanded my arm to lift, my fingers to twitch, my lungs to take a deep breath, but my body had severed all diplomatic ties with my brain. I was a ghost haunting my own flesh. Panic rose in my throat like bile, a scream building in my chest that had nowhere to go. I was screaming, shrieking for help, but the silence in the room remained unbroken. I was locked in. Then I heard voices. My hearing had sharpened to a terrifying degree, compensating for the loss of my sight. I could hear the hum of the machines, the squeak of rubber shoes on linoleum, and the rustle of a clipboard. "Mrs. Vance has suffered a catastrophic brainstem hemorrhage," a clinical voice said, likely the neurologist. "To be blunt, she is in a persistent vegetative state. The likelihood of her waking up is less than 1%. She can feel no pain, and she has no awareness of her surroundings." Liar! I wanted to shout. I am right here. I can hear the air conditioner. I can feel the rough scratch of the hospital sheets against my legs. The door opened with a soft hydraulic hiss. A new scent drifted into the sterile room, cutting through the smell of antiseptic and rubbing alcohol. It was midnight rose. It was a rich, cloying floral scent that cost $300 a bottle. I knew it because I had bought it for Sienna last Christmas. Mark and Sienna walked in. I waited for the sobs, the desperate grip on my hand, the prayers. I waited for the sound of heartbreak. "God, I hate hospitals," Mark said, his voice dripping with annoyance rather than grief. "They always smell like cheap bleach and old people. It totally ruined the vibe we had going." "Hush now," Sienna replied, and I could hear the smile in her voice. "It is tragic, Mark, but look on the bright side. At least she went down after she finished the structural drafts for the Stratos project. The completion bonus will still come to you." My heart hammered against my ribs, a prisoner beating against the bars, but the monitor beside me likely kept its steady, rhythmic beep. They thought I was a vegetable. They spoke freely, stripping away the masks they had worn for 15 years. "I guess." Mark sighed, the sound of a leather chair creaking as he sat down heavily. "But we had to leave the cake behind. We barely got to cut into it. The photos came out great, though," Sienna chirped. "Here, look at this one. The lighting at Discovery Park was perfect today. You can't even tell we were rushing." Discovery Park! The words hit me harder than the stroke, while I was lying on the office floor, paralyzed and terrified, gasping for air as my brain bled. My husband and my best friend were having a picnic. His important business was eating birthday cake in the sunlight with her. Damn, I look good in that one. Mark chuckled. "Post that one on your story. Caption it, 'Best birthday ever' or something. Just make sure you hide it from Elena's nosy coworkers." "Already done," Sienna said. 30 likes already." I felt a phantom bile rise in my throat. The nausea was overwhelming, a psychological wave of disgust that my paralyzed body could not purge. They were scrolling through Instagram, admiring their affair, while standing over my comatose body. I was not a wife or a friend to them anymore. I was an obstacle that had conveniently removed itself. I felt a hand touch my forehead. It was warm and calloused. Mark. He leaned in close. I could feel his breath, hot and smelling of the vanilla frosting they had enjoyed at the park, against my ear. He thought no one was listening. He thought the woman inside this shell was gone forever. "Rest easy, babe," he whispered, the endearment sounding like a curse. "You worked so hard. Don't worry. I will take good care of your money." He patted my cheek, 2 light taps, as if dismissing a servant. I lay there, trapped in the darkness, unable to shed the tear that burned behind my eyelid. They thought this was the end. They did not know that in the silence of my paralysis, a new purpose was taking root. I was not dying. I was listening. Over the next 3 days, my sterile sanctuary transformed into their war room. Mark did not sit by my bedside to hold my hand. Instead, he brought in a folding table and his laptop, turning the space where I lay, dying into the headquarters for his hostile takeover. He also brought reinforcements. I heard the sharp, aggressive clicking of heels that could only belong to one person. Joyce, my mother-in-law. She had never liked me, mostly because I refused to fund her gambling addiction. So, Joyce's voice cut through the air, raspy from years of chain smoking. "Is she, vegetables yet? When does the life insurance payout kick in?" "Keep it down, Mom," Mark replied, though he did not sound angry. "The doctor said she has 0 cognitive function, but we have to wait for the official declaration to access the full $2 million. $2 million. Joyce whistled low. "That will cover my debts and leave plenty for the house renovations." "Speaking of houses, what about that drafty old place by the lake? The one her parents left her already on it," Mark said, the sound of keys clacking on a keyboard filling the room. "I am contacting the realtor today. We can list it for $1.5 million. It should sell fast." Rage, hot and liquid, flooded my veins, but my body remained a frozen wasteland. That lake house was where I grew up. It was where I planned to teach Bella to swim. It was the only piece of my parents I had left. Then Sienna spoke up, her voice sickeningly sweet. "And what about the baggage you know? The kid?" Bella Mark sighed. "She is 5. I can't just leave her on the street." "Sienna, people will talk. I am not saying leave her on the street." "Silly," Sienna giggled. "I found this brochure for a boarding school in Arizona. It is very cost-effective. They take them year-round. Send her there. It solves the babysitting problem, and it frees up the room down the hall. I have been dying for a proper yoga studio with natural light." I wanted to scream. I wanted to leap from the bed and tear Sienna's throat out with my teeth. They were planning to exile my 5-year-old daughter to a cheap institution so Sienna could do yoga in her bedroom. "That is actually a genius idea." Mark agreed. "I can use Bella's college fund to pay for the first year. There is about $80,000 in that account. That should keep her away for a long time." "You are smart. Mark," Sienna cooed. "I always knew you were the brains of the operation." "I have been planning this for a while," Mark boasted, his arrogance swelling in the room. "How do you think I paid for our trip to Cabo last month? I forged Elena's signature on a few stock transfer forms. She was so buried in her blueprints she never even checked the notifications. I moved $50,000 right under her nose." My heart slammed against my ribs. This was not just a crime of opportunity. This was premeditated theft. He had been stealing from me while I worked myself into a stroke to support him. "So," Joyce interrupted, impatient, "how do we pull the plug literally? I do not want to wait months for nature to take its course. Hospital bills will eat into the inheritance. I am calling my guy now," Mark said. "He is a lawyer who specializes in difficult medical ethics. I heard the beep of a phone dialing. Yeah, hey, Miller. Mark said into the phone. It is me. Look, my wife is a vegetable. How fast can we get a court order to cease life support? Yeah, okay. No. She has no living parents. Just me. I have medical power of attorney. Great. Draft the papers. I want this done by the end of the month. He hung up. The three of them laughed, a sound that curdled my blood. They were discussing my murder with the casualness of ordering a pizza, but inside the prison of my skull, the despair that had threatened to drown me evaporated. It was replaced by something harder, something sharper. They thought I was a fading ember, waiting to be extinguished. They were wrong. Their cruelty had just provided the spark. I was not going to die. I was going to survive, just to watch them burn. For the next 48 hours, I existed solely in the space between my brain and my right index finger. I visualized the nerve pathways like the electrical schematics of a skyscraper. I imagined sending a high-voltage current down my spine, through my shoulder, past the elbow, and into the tip of that finger. I screamed orders at my own flesh until my mind felt raw, but the finger remained as still as stone. The only respite from this torture came from Sarah, the night nurse. She was a young woman with gentle hands and a voice that did not drip with condescension. Unlike the others, she spoke to me, not over me. I brought in some fresh hydrangeas for you, Elena, Sarah whispered as she adjusted my IV drip. I know you can't smell them right now, but they brighten up the room. Your daughter, Bella, has the same eyes as you. I saw her photo in your wallet. Her kindness was a lifeline, but it was quickly severed when the door swung open. Mark and Sienna entered, bringing with them the suffocating air of their betrayal. They had stopped pretending entirely. To them, I was just a piece of furniture, an ugly recliner taking up space in their new life. They sat on the small sofa near the window, entangled in each other. I heard the wet, sloppy sounds of their kissing. It made my skin crawl, a phantom sensation of spiders running over my paralyzed limbs. Ugh, look at this, Sienna said, pulling away from him. I heard the metallic slide of a ring being removed, then the slide of it being put back on. My heart seized. She was trying on my wedding ring, the 3-carat diamond Mark had given me 10 years ago, paid for with the bonus from my very first big project. It is a little big, Sienna complained, holding her hand up to the light. Elena had such chubby fingers. You will need to get this resized for me. Mark, I can't have it slipping off at the club. Consider it done, babe, Mark replied, his voice thick with lust. I will take it to the jeweler tomorrow. Besides, I need to stop by the dealership anyway. The dealership Sienna asked. Did you do it? I sure did. Mark laughed. I picked up that Porsche 911 I have been eyeing. Black on black. I put the down payment on Elena's platinum credit card. The bill collectors can chase her ghost for all I care. Why waste money on hospital bills when I can drive in style? I wanted to vomit. He was driving a sports car bought with my credit while I lay here rotting. Just when I thought my rage had peaked, the television mounted on the wall broke the news. And in local news, the anchor announced, the prestigious Emerald City Design Award goes to Stratos Architecture for the Skyline project. Lead architect Elena Vance is currently hospitalized, but the firm has announced the project will move forward. Did you hear that Mark stood up, clapping his hands? That award comes with a $50,000 cash prize. Since I am her power of attorney, I will be the one walking up on that stage to accept it. I will look great in a tuxedo holding that check. He walked over to my bed, leaning down until his face was inches from mine. His breath smelled of stale coffee. You hear that? Honey, he sneered. You are going to make me famous. You finally did something right. The mockery was the catalyst. It was the spark that jumped the gap in my severed nervous system. I focused every ounce of hatred, every drop of maternal instinct, every scream I had swallowed into my right hand. Move. Move. Damn you. And then it happened. It was microscopic. It was barely a tremor. But my index finger twitched. It lifted perhaps a single millimeter off the sheet and fell back down. Mark did not see it. He was too busy admiring his reflection in the dark monitor of the heart rate machine. He turned around and walked back to Sienna, but Sarah had just walked in to check the monitors. She froze. "Did you see that?" Sarah asked, her voice sharp. "See what?" Mark asked, annoyed. "Her hand," Sarah said, rushing to my side. She lifted my wrist, her eyes scanning my face with intense focus. "I saw movement. It is just a spasm." Mark dismissed her, waving his hand. "The doctor said those are normal, like a chicken running around with its head cut off." Sarah ignored him. She leaned close to my ear, shielding her mouth from them. "Elena," she whispered, her voice trembling slightly. "If you can hear me, if you are in there, I want you to try to blink. Just once. I am going to count to 3. 1. I poured my soul into my eyelids. I visualized the muscles contracting. 2. I screamed internally, begging my eyes to close. Please, please let me show her. 3. Nothing happened. My eyes remained wide, staring unblinkingly at the ceiling tiles. The connection had short-circuited again. "See?" Sienna laughed from the corner. "She is gone." "Nurse, stop giving yourself false hope. It is creepy." Sarah stared at me for a long moment. She did not look disappointed. She looked calculated. She gently placed my hand back on the bed. "Right," Sarah said, her voice neutral. "Just a spasm." But as she walked to the end of the bed to update my chart, I heard the scratch of her pen. She wrote for a long time. She knew. She had seen the impossible, and she was not going to let it go. Sarah's suspicion had hardened into a quiet, tactical resolve. She moved around my room not with the bustle of a nurse, but with the stealth of an investigator. Earlier that morning, under the guise of fluffing my pillows, she had slid a small, cold object underneath my head. It was a digital voice recorder. "I am going to leave this running. Elena," she had whispered, her lips barely moving. "Technically, it is to monitor your breathing patterns for sleep apnea. But if anyone speaks in this room, it will hear them." She tucked the device deep into the pillowcase, hidden from view but perfectly positioned to capture every sound in the room. I lay there, my head resting on the only weapon I had, waiting for the wolves to arrive. They did not disappoint. Mark and his mother, Joyce, entered first, followed by the clicking of Sienna's heels. The atmosphere was heavy with greed and impatience. "We are getting close to the deadline," Joyce rasped, likely lighting a cigarette in her mind. "When is day 30? Mark next Tuesday," Mark replied, his voice calm and terrifyingly assured. "That is the magic number. Dr. Harrison said that if she shows no significant neurological improvement by day 30, the ethics board will sign off on the withdrawal of life support. We just have to wait them out." "Good," Joyce grunted. "I am tired of coming to this place. It is depressing." Sienna cleared her throat, the sound sharp and demanding. I heard the familiar thud of my laptop being placed on the overbed table. "Forget the ethics board for a second," Sienna said. "We have a problem with the offshore accounts. I tried to access the Swiss holding, but the password isn't the same as her email." "Move over," Mark said. I heard him dragging a chair across the floor. Elena was predictable, but she wasn't stupid. She changed the financial passwords annually. However, I watched her log in when we were in Aspen. I saw the reflection in the window. He began to type, narrating the keystrokes with a smug satisfaction that made my blood boil. "Capital V, lowercase ants, 2, 0, 2, 4. $. Mark recited slowly. "And we are in. Balance is $400,000. Jackpot." Sienna squealed. "Transfer it. Now. Before the estate freezes it." "Already doing it," Mark replied. "And while I am at it, I am calling the real estate agent about the lake house. We need to liquidate it fast." He put the phone on speaker. I heard the ring, then the agent's voice. "This is Keller Realty." "Hey, this is Mark Vance," my husband said smoothly. "Look, we want to list the property on Lake Washington. We want a quick cash sale. List it for 20% under market value. I want it sold by the end of the week." I listened as he sold off my childhood home, the place where my parents' ashes were scattered, for pennies on the dollar just to fund his new life. But the true horror was yet to come. "You are sure this is safe?" Mark Sienna asked, her voice dropping to a nervous whisper after he hung up the phone. "I mean, what if they do an autopsy? What if they find out why her blood pressure spiked so high?" My heart stopped. The room went dead silent. "Relax, babe," Mark scoffed. "They won't find anything. It wasn't poison. I didn't give her arsenic. I just helped nature along." "But the pills," Sienna hissed. "For 3 months," Mark said, his voice dropping lower, vibrating with a chilling pride. "For 3 months. I have been swapping her high-dosage blood pressure medication with those vitamin supplements you bought. She thought she was managing her hypertension, but she was basically taking sugar pills while working 80-hour weeks. She was a ticking time bomb. I just cut the wire. The revelation crashed into me like a physical blow. It was not just stress. It was not just bad luck. My husband had systematically murdered me. He had watched me swallow those pills every morning, asked me if I felt okay, and kissed me goodbye, knowing he was slowly killing me. This was not abandonment. It was an execution. They left an hour later, confident that their secrets were safe with the vegetable in the bed, but the recorder under my pillow had heard everything. At 2 a.m, the door opened. It was Sarah. The room was dark, lit only by the monitors. She reached under my pillow and retrieved the device. I heard the click of the playback button, then the fast-forward whine, and finally, the hushed replay of Mark's voice confessing to the medication swap. Sarah gasped. It was a sharp intake of breath that sucked the air out of the room. "Oh my God," she whispered, her voice shaking. He killed you." She dropped the recorder on the bed and grabbed my hand. Her grip was tight, desperate. She needed to know she wasn't alone in this horror. "Elena," she cried softly, "please, you have to fight. They are going to kill you next Tuesday. I need you to fight." The rage inside me was no longer a fire. It was a nuclear reactor. I channeled every ounce of that fury into my face. I commanded my eyelids to lift. Slowly, agonizingly, a crack of light appeared. My right eye opened. Just a slit, but it was open. I saw Sarah's tear-streaked face hovering over me. Then, I sent the signal to my hand. I squeezed her fingers. It wasn't a twitch. It was a grip. Sarah froze, staring at our joined hands. Then she looked into my half-open eye. We didn't need words. In the silence of that hospital room, a pact was sealed. The victim and the witness had just declared war. The very next morning, the dynamic in my room shifted from a death watch to a covert operation. Sarah took the voice recorder directly to Dr. Harrison, the department head. He was a man of ironclad integrity, the kind of doctor who still believed the Hippocratic Oath meant something. I was not present for their meeting, but Sarah told me later that his face went pale as he listened to Mark confess to swapping my medication. He returned to my room with a grim determination. He ordered a full toxicology screen and a specific blood panel to check for long-term beta-blocker deficiency and synthetic discrepancies. He did not log this in the main hospital server where Mark, as my medical proxy, could see it. He kept it in a physical file, locked in his desk. "Elena, Dr. Harrison whispered, leaning over me while checking my pupil response. "I know you can hear me. We are going to prove this, but until we have the police here, you must remain absolutely still. You have to play dead to stay alive. I blinked once. Yes. My recovery was nothing short of miraculous, fueled not by medicine but by a pure distillation of hatred. Over the next 48 hours, sensation returned to my extremities like a rushing tide. I regained control over my facial muscles. I could wiggle my toes. I could make a fist, but I did none of these things when the door opened. When my husband and best friend were in the room, I was a statue. I was the corpse they wanted me to be. It was torture. Sienna, emboldened by my lack of response, began to treat me with open contempt. She sat on the edge of my bed, eating a yogurt, and casually reached out to slap my cheek. It was not hard, but the disrespect burned hotter than a brand. Hello. Anybody home? Sienna giggled, tapping my face again. God, she really is gone. Isn't she? Just a shell? She is history, Mark said, not even looking up from his phone. Speaking of history, I fired that annoying assistant of hers today. What was her name, Lisa? Oh, finally. Sienna sighed. She was so nosy. Yeah, I told her the firm was restructuring. Mark chuckled. I hired your cousin, Brad, to take her spot. He doesn't know a thing about architecture, but he knows how to keep his mouth shut and sign the checks I tell him to sign. I lay there, forcing my breathing to remain shallow and rhythmic. They were dismantling my legacy, firing the loyal staff who had helped build Stratos and replacing them with their incompetent cronies. Then came the moment that nearly broke me. The door creaked open, and I heard small, hesitant footsteps. Daddy, a tiny voice whispered. It was Bella. My heart slammed against my ribs so hard I was terrified the monitor would give me away. Come here, sweetie, Mark said, his voice dropping into a fake, syrupy tone that made my skin crawl. Say goodbye to Mommy. I felt a small, warm hand touch my arm. Mommy Bella whispered, Mommy, please wake up. I drew you a picture. It is a unicorn. Silence. I screamed inside my head. I love you, Bella. Mommy is right here. Why won't she wake up? Daddy. Bella's voice cracked. Is she mad at me? Mark sighed, a long, theatrical sound. I didn't want to tell you this, Bella. But yes, Mommy is very tired of being a mommy. She decided to go to sleep because she doesn't want to play with you anymore. She doesn't love us enough to wake up. The cruelty of the lie was physical. It felt like he had taken a knife and twisted it in my gut. He was planting trauma in our daughter's mind that would last a lifetime, just to make his transition to a widower easier. Bella began to sob, a heart-wrenching sound that filled the room. No, she wailed. I will be good, Mommy. I promise I will be good. My hand twitched under the sheet. I was a split second away from tearing the IVs out of my arm and launching myself at his throat. I wanted to kill him. I wanted to wrap my hands around his neck and squeeze until his eyes popped out. Sarah, who was pretending to check the monitors, suddenly stepped in. She placed her hand firmly over mine, pinning it to the mattress. It looked like a comforting gesture, but her grip was steel. She was holding me back from blowing my cover. That is enough, Sarah said sharply to Mark. She is getting upset. You need to take her out. Now. Fine, Mark snapped. Come on, Bella, let's go get ice cream. Forget about her. He dragged my weeping daughter out of the room. The moment the door clicked shut, my eyes flew open. I gasped for air, my chest heaving with sobbing breaths I had been holding back. I am going to kill him, I rasped, my voice sounding like gravel grinding together. Sarah, I swear on my life, I am going to make him suffer for every single tear she just cried. Sarah squeezed my hand, her eyes fierce. You will, she promised. Dr. Harrison just got the lab results back 5 minutes ago. She pulled a folded paper from her pocket. Positive for toxic levels of unauthorized beta blockers and sedatives, Sarah whispered, and 0 trace of your prescribed medication. We have the proof. Elena. Dr. Harrison has already contacted the Economic Crimes Unit and the Homicide Division. They are on their way. It was day 29. The countdown to my execution had reached its final 24 hours. Downstairs in the main lobby of Mercy General, Mark was currently hosting a grotesque charade he called a pre-memorial gathering. He had invited my business partners, key clients from Stratos Architecture, and even a few of our neighbors to offer their preemptive condolences. He was cementing the narrative of the grieving widower before my heart had even stopped beating. I lay in the dim light of the room, my body still feigning the heavy, unmoving sleep of the vegetative, while my mind was sharpening the blade of my retribution. The door opened, bringing with it the sound of distant chatter and the smell of expensive wine. Mark entered first, loosening his tie with a sigh of exaggerated relief. Sienna followed him, and the sight of her nearly made me break character. She was wearing the crimson velvet dress. I remembered sketching that design on a napkin 3 years ago. I had spent 40 hours hand-stitching the bodice for her 30th birthday. Now, she wore it to my deathbed, looking not like a mourner, but like a woman attending a gala. Did you see the look on the CEO's face? Sienna laughed, kicking off her heels and flopping onto the sofa. He was practically crying when you gave that speech about Elena's unfulfilled dreams. You are a natural actor, babe. I do what I have to do. Mark smirked, walking over to the cabinet where he had stashed a bottle of Merlot. He poured the dark red liquid into 2 paper cups from the bathroom dispenser. Tomorrow, at 9 in the morning, the lawyer and the notary will be here. Once I sign that power of attorney transfer and the directive to withdraw life support, it is over. We will be free by lunchtime. Sienna took the cup, her eyes gleaming over the rim. And you are sure about the... Clean up 100%, Mark said, clinking his paper cup against hers. I have already arranged for a direct transfer to the crematorium. No autopsy, no embalming. We burn the body immediately. Fire purifies everything, including any trace of those beta blockers in her blood. By the time anyone thinks to ask questions, she will just be dust in an urn on your mantelpiece. To dust, then? Sienna giggled. And to the $2 million in life insurance. To us, Mark replied. They drank the wine, celebrating their perfect crime just 5 feet away from their victim. I listened to every word, etching the sound of their laughter into my memory. They were so arrogant, so drunk on their own cleverness, that they forgot the first rule of hunting: make sure the prey is actually dead before you pose for the photo. They left an hour later to crash at a nearby hotel, not wanting to spend their last night before the big payday in a hospital chair. The moment they were gone, Sarah slipped into the room like a shadow. She did not turn on the lights. She worked by the glow of the corridor. She stood on a chair and reached up to the smoke detector on the ceiling. With precise movements, she attached a tiny object, a micro camera no larger than a button. The detectives gave me this, Sarah whispered to me as she climbed down. It has a wide-angle lens and a microphone. It is streaming directly to a server at the precinct. Tomorrow, when they pull out those papers, the whole world is going to watch them sign their own arrest warrants. She leaned over the bed and smoothed my hair. Also, I made a call. She continued softly. Mr. Henderson is here. Mark thinks he fired him last week, but I reached out to him personally. He is currently sitting in the cafeteria drinking bad coffee, waiting for my signal. He has the original trust documents proving Mark has no authority to sell the company. I looked at her, and though I kept my face slack, I let my eyes convey the gratitude that words could not. We were ready. The stage was set, the actors were in place, and the script had been rewritten. Mark thought he was coming here tomorrow to pull the plug on his wife. He had no idea he was walking into a guillotine. The morning sun of day 30 cut through the blinds like a spotlight, illuminating the crowded stage of my hospital room. The air was thick with the scent of cheap cologne and nervous sweat. Mark stood at the foot of my bed, flanked by his mother, Joyce, and Sienna, who was anxiously tapping her manicured nails against her phone case. To his right stood Miller, the lawyer, arranging a stack of documents on the rolling table, and a notary public who looked like he wanted to be anywhere else. Mark picked up the heavy fountain pen. He paused for effect, wiping a non-existent tear from his cheek. He looked at the gathered audience with a practiced expression of tragic resolve. "This is the hardest thing I have ever had to do," Mark said, his voice trembling just enough to be convincing. "But I know this is what Elena wanted. She told me once that she never wanted to live as a vegetable. She wanted dignity." "Sign it, son," Joyce urged, her greedy eyes fixed on the papers. "Set her free." Mark nodded solemnly. He lowered the pen to the paper. The tip hovered just millimeters above the signature line that would end my life and transfer my assets. "Goodbye, my love," he whispered. At that exact second, I unleashed the storm I had been holding back for weeks. I focused on my chest, willing my heart to hammer against my ribs. The steady, hypnotic beep of the heart monitor suddenly spiked. It accelerated into a rapid, frantic rhythm that sounded like a drum roll. Beep, 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 beep. The sound pierced the room. Mark froze, the pen touching the paper but not moving. Everyone turned to look at the monitor. In that moment of stunned silence, I opened my eyes. I did not flutter them open. I snapped them open, wide and fierce. I engaged my core muscles and sat bolt upright, defying weeks of atrophy with pure adrenaline. I reached up with my right hand, grabbed the plastic oxygen mask covering my nose and mouth, and ripped it off. I threw it to the floor. The room erupted. I never wanted this. "Mark," I rasped. My voice was rough, like gravel grinding on glass, but it was loud and unmistakably clear. Mark gasped, a sound like he had been punched in the gut. He dropped the pen. It clattered loudly onto the linoleum floor. He stumbled backward, his legs hitting the metal instrument tray and sending sterile tools crashing down with a deafening noise. His face drained of all color, turning a sickly shade of gray. "Jesus Christ," Sienna shrieked. Her hands flew up in terror, and the cup of hot coffee she was holding slipped from her grip. It splashed all over the front of her red dress and down her bare legs, but she did not even seem to feel the burn. She stared at me with wide, terrified eyes. Joyce pressed her back against the wall, her hands clutching her chest. "You," Joyce stammered, her jaw trembling. You are a ghost. Is she a ghost?" I turned my head slowly, locking eyes with each of them. I let them see the intelligence burning in my gaze. I let them see the predator I had become. "I am very much alive," I said, pointing a shaking finger at my husband. "And I heard everything. I heard about your little picnic at Discovery Park while I was dying. I heard about the fake blood pressure pills you swapped for vitamins. I heard you planning to send Bella to a boarding school in Arizona. And I heard your plot to murder me for the insurance money." The notary and the lawyer looked at each other in horror, slowly backing away from the bed. Mark's shock quickly morphed into panic. He saw his life crumbling, and his instinct for self-preservation kicked in. He lunged toward the bed, his eyes wild and desperate. "She is hallucinating," Mark shouted, reaching for my shoulders. "It is the brain damage. She is delirious. She has lost her mind. Help me restrain her." He was inches away from grabbing me, his fingers curled into claws, ready to silence me one last time, but he never touched me. The door to the small ensuite bathroom burst open. Dr. Harrison stepped out, his face grim. Behind him were two large men in plain clothes, badges hanging from chains around their necks. "Step away from the patient. Mr. Vance," one of the officers boomed, his hand resting on the weapon at his hip. "Police, put your hands where I can see them." Now the police officers moved with swift, brutal efficiency. Before Mark could take a single step toward me, 2 large hands slammed him against the wall. The metallic click of handcuffs ratcheting shut was the most satisfying sound I had ever heard. Sienna tried to bolt for the door, her heels clicking frantically on the linoleum, but the second officer caught her by the arm. She shrieked, flailing in her stained red dress like a trapped animal. "You have the right to remain silent," the officer announced, his voice booming in the small room. "But we already have your confession on tape. Dr." Harrison stepped forward and pressed a button on a remote. The television on the wall, usually reserved for daytime talk shows, flickered to life. It played the high-definition footage from the hidden camera Sarah had installed. The audio was crystal clear. Mark's voice filled the room, dripping with arrogance as he spoke to Sienna the night before. "It wasn't poison, I just swapped her high-dosage blood pressure medication with those vitamin supplements. I just cut the wire." The color drained from Mark's face until he looked like a corpse. The notary and the corrupt lawyer backed away from him as if he were radioactive. "No!" Mark screamed, twisting violently in the officer's grip. He looked at Sienna with wild, desperate eyes. It was her idea. "She made me do it. She told me Elena was cheating on me. She said we deserved the money. I was manipulated." Sienna's face twisted into a mask of pure, ugly fury. She lunged at Mark, her fingernails raking across his cheek, leaving deep, bloody scratches before the officer yanked her back. "You lying coward," Sienna screeched, spitting at him. "You went to the black market to buy the fakes. You put them in her pill organizer every Sunday. Don't you dare pin this on me." In the corner, Joyce was trying to inch her way toward the exit, clutching her purse to her chest. She looked like a rat abandoning a sinking ship. But a uniformed officer stepped into her path, crossing his arms. "Going somewhere?" "Ma'am," the officer asked. "You are under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder and conspiracy to defraud a minor." "I didn't do anything," Joyce wailed, her voice cracking. "I am just an old woman. I just wanted my son to be happy." "Save it for the judge," the officer said, grabbing her wrist and spinning her around. Then the door opened again. Mr. Henderson, my loyal lawyer, walked in. He held a briefcase in one hand and a stack of files in the other. He walked right past Mark without even looking at him. "I have reviewed the transfer documents, Mr. Vance prepared." "Mr. Henderson announced to the room, holding up the papers Mark had been about to sign. "The signatures are blatant forgeries. I also have an affidavit from the bank proving unauthorized transfers. Every piece of paper this man is holding is void." Mark slumped against the wall, defeated. The arrogant man who had toasted to my death just hours ago was gone. In his place was a pathetic, trembling criminal. The officers began to drag them out. As they passed the foot of my bed, Mark looked up at me. His eyes were pleading, wet with tears of self-pity. "Elena," he whimpered, "please, I am your husband. Don't let them take me." I looked him dead in the eye. I felt no love, no pity, only a cold, hard resolve. "You like picnics, right, Mark?" I asked, my voice steady and cutting as a knife. "I hope you enjoy the recreation yard in prison. I hear the fresh air is lovely." He sobbed as they hauled him into the hallway. The hospital staff, who had gathered outside the door, watched in silence as the 3 of them were marched away in shackles. The shame was absolute. They were paraded past the nurses they had insulted and the doctors they had tried to fool. Once they were gone, the room felt instantly lighter. The air was breathable again. Then, I heard the sound I had been fighting to return to. "Mommy." My mother ran into the room, looking exhausted but relieved. She must have flown in on the first flight after Sarah called her, but my eyes were fixed on the small figure beside her. Bella broke free from her grandmother's hand and scrambled onto the bed. "You woke up," Bella cried, burying her face in my neck. "Daddy said you wouldn't wake up. He said you went away." I wrapped my arms around her small, trembling body. I pulled her close, smelling the strawberry shampoo and the innocence that Mark had tried to steal from us. Tears streamed down my face, but they were not tears of pain. They were tears of victory. "I am here, baby," I whispered, kissing the top of her head. "Mommy is right here, and I am never going to sleep again." 6 months had passed since the day I woke up from the dead. I sat in the front row of the Seattle Superior Court, my hands resting calmly on the armrests of my wheelchair. The room was silent, save for the heavy, rhythmic ticking of the wall clock. It was a sound that used to remind me of my limited time, but now it sounded like a heartbeat. My heartbeat. The judge, a stern woman with eyes that missed nothing, looked down at the 3 defendants. Mark, Sienna, and Joyce stood in their orange jumpsuits, stripped of their arrogance, their designer clothes, and their dignity. "Mark Vance," the judge announced, her voice echoing off the mahogany walls, "for the crimes of attempted first-degree murder, fraud, and embezzlement. I sentence you to 25 years in a state penitentiary without the possibility of parole." Mark slumped forward, his forehead hitting the table. He did not look at me. He could not bear to look at the woman he failed to kill. "Sienna Miller," the judge continued, "for conspiracy to commit murder and acting as an accomplice. You are sentenced to 15 years. Sienna began to sob, a jagged, ugly sound that garnered no sympathy from the gallery. Finally, Joyce was sentenced to house arrest for the remainder of her life, with every single asset seized to pay for my medical bills and emotional damages. They were ruined. Justice had not just been served, it had been delivered with a sledgehammer. Leaving the courthouse felt like stepping out of a long, dark tunnel. The air smelled sweeter. The sun felt warmer, but I had more work to do than just watching them rot. I returned to my firm the next day. The first thing I did was tear down the sign that read Stratus Architecture. It was a name associated with the old Elena, the one who worked herself to the bone for ungrateful leeches. In its place, I hung a new sign, forged in burnished copper phoenix designs. I was no longer building for others. I was building for myself, rising from the ashes of my own destruction to create something indestructible. I sold the house by the lake. It held too many memories of Mark's whispers and Sienna's laughter. I used the proceeds, along with the recovered funds from the Swiss accounts, to buy a villa overlooking the Pacific Ocean. It was open, airy, and filled with light. There were no shadows there for monsters to hide in. I also established the Vance Initiative. It was a foundation dedicated to providing legal and financial aid to women trapped in abusive or exploitative marriages. I wanted to ensure that no woman would ever feel as helpless as I did lying in that hospital bed, unable to scream, on a Sunday afternoon, the kind of golden day that Mark and Sienna had stolen from me. I hosted a picnic, but this was not a secret celebration of greed. It was a celebration of life. We sat on the lush green lawn of my new home, the sound of the ocean crashing against the cliffs below. Bella was running through the grass, chasing a kite, her laughter ringing out like wind chimes. Watching her was Sarah, who was no longer just my nurse, but my partner in the foundation and the sister I never had. "Here," Sarah said, handing me a glass of fresh lemonade. "You should look at this." It made the front page. She handed me the Sunday paper. There, below the fold, were the mugshots of Mark and Sienna. The headline read, "The Picnic Plot Final Sentencing Handed Down." I looked at Mark's face. He looked hollow. I looked at Sienna. She looked bitter. I felt nothing. The hate that had fueled my recovery had burned itself out, leaving behind a clean, quiet peace. I crumpled the newspaper into a ball. "Sarah," I said softly, "help me up." "Are you sure?" Sarah asked, putting her glass down. "You have been in the chair all morning. I am sure, I replied. I am done sitting down. I locked the brakes on the wheelchair, gritting my teeth against the dull ache in my muscles. I grabbed the armrests. I pushed. My legs, once wasted and useless, trembled with effort. But I forced them to straighten. I stood up. I took the crumpled newspaper and tossed it into the recycling bin. I watched it disappear among the trash, exactly where it belonged. Then I turned my face to the sun, standing tall on my own 2 feet, rooted firmly in the earth I had fought to stay on. They wanted to bury me. I whispered to the wind, a smile touching my lips. But they forgot that I was a seed, and now I have bloomed brighter than ever before. Thank you so much for listening to this story on Lily Revenge Stories, and I hope you enjoyed seeing justice served as much as I did writing it. Please leave a comment down below telling me where you are listening from right now, as I would love to connect with you and hear your thoughts on Elena's journey. Don't forget to subscribe to the Lily Revenge Stories channel, like this video, and smash that hype button so this story can reach even more people.